Greetings. Today we're going to talk about the hydronic line installation within the insulation underneath the subfloor. So first things first, let's take off this subfloor, which is the stock cargo van floor the Mercedes van came with. So we're taking that out, and then we're going to run some rough electrical in the deepest channel underneath the subfloor. We're going to do a 3-wire conductor for an AC circuit, and then we are going to do a 2-wire conductor, 6 gauge, for a DC circuit to the alternator. And then we're going to do a 10 gauge 2-wire DC conductor underneath the front passenger seat. So that's what those wires there are on the rack. We're also going to install a pull string just in case we need to pull a wire in the future, which we did outside of this video clip. So that's the deepest channel in the van. You'll also notice I didn't put any floor supports underneath the subfloor, and that's because the floor holds up fine with the stock floor on top of this insulation, and there's not anywhere for it to crumple and go to. So no need for extra weight or complexity, in my opinion. Do your own thing with your own build, but I did mine with this one. And if you have thoughts on that, well, you can keep them to yourself or let the world know in the comments below. Okay, after we did some more cleanup under the floor with the vacuum and things, I went ahead and did some taping of aluminum tape over the cracks within the different segments of foam board, because this foam board is going to be pretty locked in place now now that the hydronic lines are going in. We don't plan on moving it again. One other thing I'll note is that if I had to do sound deadening again, I would have just put the sound deadening tape in the deepest part of the rib lines underneath this foam insulation, like you see on some other build channels. Live and learn. And the reason I would have done that is because then I wouldn't have added another layer of material any higher than I needed to, because vertical space comes at a premium. All right, so I'm just drying out my lines with a drywall tee for my hydronic system. And I did this on the van surface first, and then I realized it didn't make sense, so I went and redrew it on a piece of paper in my van build journal. And once I did that, it made a lot more sense. So I also drew arrows on the lines to designate the direction of flow of the glycol solution, so that would be crystal clear. One thing I would do in the future is potentially add more lines, because when I looked at Rexon's website, they have a hydronic floor kit that has more lines. We'll see how this one works, but the longer your lines are, the more radiation you're going to have, but the faster the flow rate you're going to need to keep the temperature high. The less lines you have, the less radiation you're going to have, but the slower your flow rate can be to keep the temperature of the glycol high. Once everything was marked, we were ready to start routing out our channels. What I did was I routed out a channel in a small piece of scrap foam, and I cut a small piece of my glycol PEX pipe, and I put it in there, made sure it fit nice and snug. And once I had verified that in my test environment, I went to production and started routing with my dad helping me out here. So vacuuming the dust is very important as you go. You do not want to breathe any of these plastic particles. You should probably wear a respirator as well when you're doing this, just to be extra cautious. Again, you only have one set of lungs, so it's just not worth it to be not on the safe side. So following our cut line, we route all the way around the van floor a few times to our start and end location, which is here, trying to make long 90s on our corners. Once we're done with that, we are ready to get our hydronic line in its channel that we just carved. Now, the XPS insulation we have that's white has a foil membrane on the bottom of it and on the top of it. I didn't buy this by preference, but I think it's going to work better for radiation. It's just what Home Depot had, so they had more of this than the purple stuff. Okay, so I also got some aluminum foil out of the kitchen to lay that down in the front part of the van. The back is going to be the garage, and I just put the pipe underneath it like meat in a burrito or a hot dog in a bun. And the idea is to spread more radiation, and then I tape down that aluminum foil with the aluminum foil tape. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I'll get a measurement tool that measures the heat coming off of it, and we'll be able to get some data to test it. Okay, so here comes the subfloor, and I drilled a couple holes for these pipes to come out. What I wish I would have done is installed PEX 90-degree elbows so we'd have a nice vertical transition here, because it was such a bear to get these pipes to stay in their grooves while I put the subfloor down. I ended up getting the jigsaw and cutting a much bigger hole out after I'd already started spray foaming channels with a can of spray foam in the van, so it was a little hectic. Fortunately, my dad was there to help with the whole process and help kind of get things back on track and keep things in control. So in the end, it worked out. We were able to get these lines in place, and I'll go back in and trim them and put the 90s in at a later time. Okay. Once that was done, we got our front segment of floor, and it used to be attached to the back segment of floor with a metal bar. I don't think I'm going to put that back in there. I think I'm just going to use my finished floor options, which you'll see in a future video, and cover that way. So no reason to raise the elevation. So the last thing we do is we put our old bolts back in, which are actually new 1-inch longer bolts that we bought on, 70 millimeter long bolts that we bought on Amazon, but all the other hardware is the same. And we're just putting all this back in, hand tightening it, and then filling the cavity with spray foam, and then using the electric wrench to tighten it down. And once we're done with this, the old floor is back in and we are good to go. Subfloor installation complete. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.